This podcast was brought to you by Meros Cryptocurrency. Meros is a cryptocurrency payment system that does what cryptocurrency originally intended to do. Be a practical and secure form of direct payment, Meros utilizes the best of current technology in a powerful new way. It introduces a groundbreaking consensus mechanism called merit caching. This enables Meros to be both feeless and instant while maintaining the same level of integrity of traditional networks like Bitcoin. To find out how you can participate in the future of crypto payments, go to meroscrypto.io now.
Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of State of the Project Meros. And this podcast is all about Meros, which is it's quite an outstanding new project, which is being led by a developer called Kayaba, who we've got on the podcast. We have this podcast every month and it's available on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, all the usual places. So make sure you like and subscribe. Right, so without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for this podcast, and his name is Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you, sir?
Great, excited to be back as always.
Excellent. I'm delighted to have you back. We really have got loads to get through today, and we've spent about an hour just catching up. So let's see if we can condense all of that down into a 30-minute podcast. So first of all, I wanted to ask you, how was TabConf, which was a conference that you went to recently? How did you find it? And did you make any good connections that you could tell us about?
TabConf was great, and I definitely made a lot of connections. Hesitant to name any because I don't want to start any rumors about partnership X, partnership Y, or in the case that they hear about this, I don't want them to feel like I'm using their names. But TabConf definitely had a lot of developers, a lot of businesses who were interested in Meros, and then there were some other big names who I wouldn't expect anything to happen with years, but I actually got to talk with some of the people with BitPay who were actually sponsoring the conference. So that was great.
So the conference, how long was it for? And did you have any actual speaking arrangements, or was you literally just there networking and trying to get the name of Meros out amongst the other projects that were there?
So I was not a speaker, but I did attend some lectures. A lot of it was they're truly trying to target everyone from business to people in there for the culture to people in there for the tech. So a lot of it was stuff I already know, except for some of the legal talks, of course, because I am not a lawyer. But I did learn some stuff, and it was over a few days. It was a weekend. So yeah, I was mainly there for the connection. So and I really do feel like I got Meros out there, which I'm quite happy about.
Excellent. That is great news. That is great news. My second question, it's regarding something that was actually spoken about first in the bi-monthly Medium post, or bi-weekly, however you want to describe it, in which you discussed replacing the generic Meros Hash function. Now, could you tell us what you replaced it with, and what does this mean for the end user?
So with Meros, we used to use SHA-3. It's a hash out. Well, technically, SHA-3 is a group of hash functions, but not really important for this. So we used it. It's the successor to the hash algorithm used in Bitcoin, SHA-2. Or again, that's technically a group, but doesn't matter for the scope of this. And we used it because it was audited. It went through a whole competition, approved by NIST, a lot of popularity, noted to be secure, so on and so on. That said, there was another SHA-3 candidate because a bunch of algorithms were submitted before one was picked, which was also audited, also found to have no issues. It was sort of a runner-up. And the reason why SHA-3 won was because it was the most distinct from SHA-2. So if an issue was found in SHA-2, it would be harder to carry over to SHA-3. That said, this other candidate, it's called Blake2B. And Blake2B is really, in my eyes, just as secure, but it is much, much faster. And because it's so much faster, it should be a performance increase. So basically, anytime we're going to hash something for an identifier, like, with Bitcoin, how you get your transaction hash. So anytime you need to hash something for an identifier, now we're going to use Blake2B instead. For mining, we're currently using Argon, but we're looking at using Random X for block production. And then for the spam filter, we'll likely keep using Argon.
Okay, excellent. My next question was another one that came through the bi-weekly report. By the way, just to let listeners know or viewers know that the bi-weekly report is available on Medium. I'll put the link in the description, but it's an excellent place to keep really up to date with what's happening within Meros. It really is an excellent resource. But anyway, it's a topic, actually, this one is a topic that we've spoken about before. I think we spoke about it on the Developers Corner some months ago. But this month, we also saw the addition of remote work calculation. Now, can you describe what this is and why is it so important to Meros?
So with Meros, we have a spam filter. And you have to beat that spam filter to be able to send out your transaction. So it means you're paying a computational fee. So if you receive one Meros, you can then send one Meros, and then your next person will receive one Meros. And the reason we went with a computational fee is because it even means even if you just have a phone, you have a limited amount of Meros, if the fees for some reason ever got as high as 10 cents, or with Bitcoin, of course, $50, you don't actually lose money. It doesn't matter if you're an American who makes thousands or someone in Venezuela who makes pennies or dollars. You just use a little bit of your processing power. And as long as you have a CPU that isn't from the 90s, should only take a few seconds to calculate. So with remote work, it means that when you create your transaction, you don't actually have to do that work. You can send it to someone else and they'll do it for you. And we just made it secure. Previously, you had to sign your transaction including the work, but now you don't have to do that, meaning remote work services can do it without either A, having to send it back, or B, needing your private info. And honestly, even though the end user could pay someone to do it for them, this is not designed for the end user. It's really designed for services or groups that are dealing with tons of transactions, whether it be payment processors, exchanges, tip bots that are doing it on the network to demonstrate the speed and capabilities of Meros. And this way, if they want to not risk their server getting under too much load because they're also running other stuff, really like with exchanges, if you're a big exchange and you want to handle Meros, but you don't want to have the work become too much load, you can now set up a secondary server isolated from the rest of your network to actually do the work and publish the transactions.
Okay, it's a topic that we will discuss a bit later on, but do you think that this sort of thing lends itself well to game servers as well?
I think game servers would have enough computational power to be able to do the work. So the question is just, how often are you doing these transactions? Are you trying to encode data on the network and have the game run through data objects? Because if so, then I'd recommend you have the client computers do it. So then, because they're a gaming computer, they'd be able to. So, I mean, theoretically, anyone can. Even if you're an end user with a mobile device who has a few extra Meros, would rather just pay someone to do it. Really, anyone can do it, but it's targeted for singular servers that have to do a lot of work. So not a game server where you have access to clients' computers, but payment processors and so on.
Okay, that really does make sense. Okay, I wanted to move on to talk about the rebrand. So the rebrand is ongoing. We're quite far into it. It's really taken off. The new name Meros is really catching on. A lot of people are saying that Meros will be a brand name as big as some of the giants like Microsoft and some of those others. But how far are we from actually getting to see the new logo?
So we're still working on touching it up. To be honest, there have been some complications with the artist. So we've been trying to navigate those. But it may end up, unfortunately, that we have to reopen the contest or go through, just in case anyone who's not in our Discord is listening to this. We had a contest, or a bounty, to create the new logo. And someone who submitted the logo privately to me ended up winning, but now that artist may or may not work out. So we may have to either A, reopen the contest, or B, hire a professional to do it. So really, we're still considering our options, but it's a process. And when it comes to the bounty, we actually, even though someone from outside the server won, We didn't want anyone to think we were scam or stealing from our users. No, we love the community. And honestly, they really submitted some great logos. I really am considering going with our second pick from them if this artist doesn't work out. And even if they didn't win, we did hand out a lot of Meros there as rewards because I'm really happy with how the community stepped forward to help like that. I think the bounty was 250 and we ended up giving out or saying that we'll give out 500 when the network launches. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the bounty did actually work well. There was a lot of very good quality contenders. So I wouldn't be too upset if we did go with whoever finished in second place. I think that would still be pretty good. But moving on, let's it's something that we touched on just now, but one of the questions that came in through our State of the Project channel in Discord, we actually have a channel in Discord where you can go and submit your questions, and the best questions do actually get asked on the podcast, and this was one of them. And the question is, how easy will it be to integrate Meros into existing apps, especially games?
If you have a game and you want to use, there's a few, just as an example, of course, there's a few things you can say. Like, what if you want to use in-game purchases? Inside the game, you can, from the server, pay $5 and get that really shiny skin for your sword. Or maybe it just instantly teleports you to the final boss for a one-hit kill. I don't know. Microtransactions, getting a bit out of control there. So, for $5, you get an in-game object or whatever. And the question becomes, how do you handle it? If you want to import your private key into the game, ignoring the risks there, you would have to add in a signature library. But if all you did was tell the user, here's the address, send to it, and then the user goes to their own wallet, types in the address, and publishes the transaction, all you have to do as a server is generate addresses, see when the balance comes in, and respond accordingly. We're working on libraries, so as long as you're hosting a node, you will easily be able to grab transaction history, create addresses, and so on in a variety of languages from C++ to Node.js or targets. For a game, it really just depends on what you're doing, because we talked about that, but also if you're doing player-to-player, as in you built an MMO which uses Meros as the in-game currency, which honestly I would love to see. I just think that would be very interesting to watch. That becomes a bit more difficult, as you would have to have an in-game wallet. An independent verification would be nice. But really, it would end up with the server hosting a node, providing access to some methods, and then each game hosting a wallet in-game, generating addresses, providing a way to maintain your balance. That would be a lot more work and would not likely be something we provide a library for. No, you'd probably have to get your own signature library. We use ED25519 for generating signatures. It's not unpopular. You could definitely grab a library for it. But then you'd also have to support the Meros address format, which you would probably have to code yourself. I think we did it in less than 300 lines, but I don't remember off the top of my head. So really it just depends on how much of the wallet you're trying to replicate.
Okay. So what I'm getting from that really is that it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And perhaps once Meros is complete, there may be time, or you may put some dev power towards making some of these libraries, or making a generic sort of form for game developers to come and perhaps use. Would that be an option?
Well, we're already working on RPC libraries, because this goes beyond games to exchanges, payment platforms, tip pods, so on. I mean, those are kind of just the example three I always go to. And as long as you don't have the client, as in the game, create their own wallet and manage it in-game, using just by hosting a node and using the RPC, you can add Meros to your server. It's only when in-game you handle the address in-game, you handle the private key in-game, you create transactions in-game, would you need to do something outside of our RPC libs. I'd definitely be interested in creating a small importable lib to support that. Question is just when we get around to it.
Excellent. Thank you for that in-depth response. The next question is, I believe it's the final question that we had. It's the final question that we had submitted to our State of the Project channel in the Meros Discord. And the question goes as follows. With the announcement of JPM coin, which is the JP Morgan coin, It's obvious that banks are taking blockchain seriously as solutions for settlement. Something like Meros would be perfect as a settlement layer because of its speed, cost, and robust nature. Hypothetically, Kayaba, would you be prepared to do a deal with a banking giant and take Meros closed source? Or do you feel there is room to stay open source, decentralized, and still be a settlement layer, even without privacy features being installed on chain?
So banks are going to want features that aren't on chain and just won't be on chain. For example, banks don't want privacy. They want privacy to everyone who's not in the bank. So they want, kind of like with ZK snarks and zero coins with trusted setups. If you know that specific key, you can see anything. But if you don't know it, you can't see anything. So with banks, that's what we'd be looking at. They would create a trusted ZK snarks or zero coin setup, and then they would keep the key so they can so the bank can track everything. But unless you're the bank, you can't. And then when the government asks for records, instead of the bank saying, oh no, we don't have any, they're like, here's the key, go browse our people's data. So that's what we'd be looking at for banks, and that's something I would personally never add to Meros and wouldn't be effective as a second layer. I do think due to Meros' nature, it is a good target because it's trusted, it doesn't have 60% tied up with the creators like Ripple and so on. But I do think some banks would be concerned about the pre-mine, even though I think it's small and time locked, so I think it's pretty fair. So really what I think banks would be looking at is forking it. And banks would want to host a closed source, restricted network that only certain people could get on, and that generally has privacy, but you can reveal it with certain data. And I would be willing, potentially if they paid me enough, to fork Meros and add those features in a closed source environment, just because I feel like having that amount of auditability within a bank might be helpful to the system and making it a more trustworthy and honest system. But I would never take Meros itself closed source or restrict access to the public. And I would never agree to never make a feature open source. So for example, if a banks want privacy and then they say, okay, you can never add this privacy feature to Meros, even if you do it again or do it differently, then I wouldn't do that. But if a bank says we want privacy that we can still reveal, I would never add that to Meros, and I could still work on adding that privacy without that trusted setup. So yeah, I would definitely be open to doing that.
Excellent. That's a very, very honest answer there, Kayaba. Very honest, and I appreciate it. Okay, so finally, I just really want to know if you could let me know briefly, or let our listeners know briefly, what have you got planned for the upcoming month in Meros, and do you have any more conferences or speaking engagements planned?
So for the next month in Meros, we're really working on the database. We've got the wrapper ready. We're already saving stuff to LMDB, which is the database we've chosen for this. We've gotten some tests on, and we've actually started storing verifications in the database, which means right now, if you sync a node in the database, that will be all the verifications. So it's something I'm very excited to have. That said, we're still working on the rest of it, and that's going to be the start of the next month. And after that, we're going to work a lot of stuff on the network, resolving chain forks, so on, really things so we can get it ready for the first public testnet. So really, we're going to be working on the things that we identified by the previous testnets as things to work on. When it comes to conferences, there is South by Southwest coming up. It's a local event to me in Austin. That said, it's still huge. People come in from all across the country. And I'm very excited for it. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of blockchain talks going on. And I'm not planning on speaking anywhere, but I do think I'm going to be able to get some more networking done. And they do have mentor slots, which are interesting, where basically you can talk to some really famous people and get advice. So I think that might be a great way, not necessarily for the connection, but just because I'm not perfect and some advice would always be appreciated, especially from some of the giants in the industry. And when it comes to speaking engagements, no, I don't have any about South by Southwest, but I am personally actually attending a discussion on proof of work versus proof of stake today. So that will already be out before this podcast is published, but I do feel like I'm in a unique position to talk about that, as thanks to Meros caching, the consensus mechanism Meros uses, which is proof of work and proof of stake in a way.
I have to ask you then. If you had to choose one and only one, and you obviously cannot say you would have a hybrid of both as you do in Meros. If you had to choose one between proof of work or proof of stake, which one would you choose and why?
Well, I feel like that's just rigging the question. Can't do this, can't do this, you can't do this, you can't. No, I'm just kidding.
Otherwise, we all know what the answer would be. You'd say I'd make a hybrid and I'd use merit caching to tie the two. And you'd probably... That's
the perfect solution. That's the perfect solution to everything. You know, I was asked the other day, okay, so how do you want to travel? And I said merit caching. And they're like, that's not a travel method. And I'm like, but it's the perfect solution to everything. So must be the perfect solution. No, okay. When it comes to my actual answer, I admire how proof of stake systems have more cost to overthrow, because with proof of work, because you don't have to keep the attack going on for a long time. So with proof of work, you just rent all the machines for an hour and then you're done. That said, I think proof of stake is overly centralized. And I think there are adaptations that can be made with proof of work, like picking a CPU-only algorithm, which definitely help it out to the point where it's better than proof of stake. So I really see the benefits with both when it comes to the security from attacks with proof of stake. Because even that fake stake attack that came out, that didn't rewind chains, that just took up resources. So I understand the security benefits of proof of stake, but I think proof of work is the fairer method. And if you make the algorithm CPU only, you can really raise the attack of a cost too far to be just rented for an hour.
So what you're kind of saying is that on a general level, perhaps proof of stake may be better, but when proof of work is done well, then proof of work is better.
I'm centrist leaning proof of work. I'm definitely saying that proof of work's better just for the decentralization aspect. But you do have to be careful with your proof of work. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, right. Well, thank you, Kayaba, and especially thank you for taking that proof of work versus proof of stake question on such short notice. I kind of sprung that one on you, so thank you for taking that one. Where can people go to find out more about you and Meros?
There's always our site, meroscrypto.io, but really our discussions happen on our Discord, and I'm probably there 16 hours of the day. You know, of course, I'll be working, but if you ping me, I'll try to get back as soon as possible. So I'm sure you'll put a link to that in the video description.
Yep. Yes, I will.
Yeah, so that's one of the best places you can go. Besides that, we always have our Medium and our Twitter. Both are Meros Crypto. So yeah, there's a few places to go.
Okay, Kayaba, thank you so much. And I guess we're almost at the point where I can start saying congratulations on the project that you've built, because it really is coming on in leaps and bounds. So it's really great work that you're doing, and everybody who's listening will probably be doing another one of these in a month from now. So it'll be at the start of April. So, look forward to that one. Make sure to like and subscribe and all of those other good things. And myself, hopefully, Kayaba will join us again next month, and we'll keep everybody up to date on the state of the project Meros. Kayaba, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
This show is brought to you by PivX, private instant verified transactions. With its groundbreaking zero coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex. And for more information, go to www.pivx.org.